little bit of local craft or artifact, if you will. This is kind of like a mini stove. I'll take the one on top there. You put some burning sticks underneath in that one hole, and then your pot's above, and it keeps them warm, or cooks things, I suppose. Okay, today I'm beginning my own walking tour following a book written by two. Now, while I'm looking for specific things that she talks about in the guidebook, I won't necessarily know that I found it, but this looks like European, or what they call the Inca Classic, because it's the period after the Spanish got here and started rebuilding things. But this looks like it might have been original stones that were stolen and used, reused again by the Spanish or even later peoples, and yet here's very much recent. At this intersection, I am supposed to be drawn to a beautiful stairway. Looking to my right, I don't see anything that doesn't look relatively new. To my left, I am looking at the first stairway that I climbed up when I was here the first day and had dinner, and it goes up to my hostel. So apparently I am now going to get to climb it again. So a closer look. I don't know whether the guidebook's intent is to suggest this is an ancient stairway or not. The stones that make up this very rough entryway appear to be stones that would have been worked perhaps in the time of the Incas. Not at all uncommon for the Spanish to have taken the buildings they destroyed and used the rock here. Notice also that one of the prime building areas in this part of Peru is mud, straight dirt mixed with straw, very biblical. And then some kind of a plaster coating, which you can see is eroding off here because this building's not being maintained, which is normal. Now this wall has a certain allusion to one of the styles. Down at the bottom here, pieces are designed to fit. There isn't any mortar. As we get up a little bit farther, there appears to be a little bit of mortar being used, but still a reasonably rough attempt to join the stones accurately. Here's one of two entryways that show some nicely worked stone. I'll show you the other in a moment. This wall, very much Inca. Usually this was used, I believe, according to my guidebook, particularly there's an even better example. Notice how nice that work is right in the center. Let's get in a little bit tighter. But this would have been used for people's homes, perhaps lesser, not the main temples, but lesser temples. And notice these are the same size in each course. Now notice this looks to be a very original one, unless it was stolen and moved here. Notice how tightly the stones fit. Of the three styles, each one had its variations, and perhaps there were even mixes. But this one, you'll notice the individual stones are beveled, and that was just a style variation. Here, two serpents. Serpents were, of course, important here, at least in Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo. There was the trilogy of the llama, the puma, and the serpiente. This symbol in the center, I'm not sure what it represents, but notice that there is a trilogy there: the large, then the small, then the large, etc., etc. And remember, the stonework that was used for the ordinary homes and businesses would be this kind of random rock just placed in there, may or may not have any mortar holding it in place. Whether this is actually new or original, don't know. This entire wall looks original, and it kind of looks like a cross between the sedimentary style, which was individual layers of the same size, usually small rocks, nicely fitted, to the third or less revered style for less revered buildings. Notice the top courses seem to be the ones that are most precisely done. And since I'm always on a search to find out new things, not necessarily to document what I know, one of the things that's interesting about this wall are the various colors that I see on the stone. And I'm wondering if that's from some kind of painting, or if it's the chemicals in the stone, or the runoff, I don't know. Now we are at Coracali, via Piatonal, in other words, a people-only street. Okay, this wall on our left as we enter, according to the guidebook, is a Spanish reworked wall. And according to the guidebook, it is a mixture of sedimentary arrays blended with cellular and polygon arrays. Let's see if we can find examples of those. Now, the sedimentary design simply refers to layers of roughly the same size, and we're looking at that now. So the cellular pattern, sometimes found in the sedimentary design style, would appear to be a central rock with stones radiating around it like the petals of a flower. It's not clear whether this style would be singular and visible in a wall as a unique pattern, or whether it was a repeated pattern. Here's a second example. All of this wall is very sloppy, which apparently indicates the lack of skill of the Spaniards compared to the incredible skill of the Inca. Here, an anomaly where three fairly well-worked stones normally found in a doorway or windowway are just put in here. In this part of the wall, just a mishmash of what were probably very nicely worked stones, like that large square one, a rectangular there, and this somewhat trapezoidal one here, and any other kind of debris that was lying around. Very untypical of what the Incas would have done. This large stone and the stones that surround it may indicate that cellular design. If these in fact are cellular designs, this might be the nicest one. And in this portion of the wall, a totally new reconstruction. Lots and lots of mortar, very sloppily done, but in character. This portion of the wall has the look of originality. Very nice corner. Now here's an example of what actually was done, although this is probably new, and that is that the top courses could be stucco, and that's of course, or not stucco, but adobe, and that's what this is. It's probably a very new construction. Where that came from is anyone's guess. And what this shelf is for is interesting. Could it have been for a flower plant? Who knows? These holes here may just represent drainage. We saw more refined holes in other works, like the temples and so forth. Now, looking at this stucco overlay, which is about ready to fall off, but what you see is a tremendous amount of plant material, grass or something like that, underneath it, which apparently formed a significant part of the layer of stucco. Maybe like Teotihuacan, they used one base layer of plaster and then had a finish layer over the top, which is what we're looking at, that's white. Now this looks like the cellular with the round rock in the center and then the larger rocks as petals around it. This seems to me, these three squared blocks seem to me to be evidence of the Spanish destruction of some Inca building and the reuse of the stone. I was walking down the same road and some gentlemen let me come into their art studio, and so now we're coming into it and showed me all of their work. Yeah. And there's very beautiful pictures, muy lindo. And this picture, which I looked at and thought, that looks like Apache, and that's exactly what it is. As soon as I looked at this painting, I recognized it as Apache. Here's another entryway. This looks particularly the symbol at the top, looks very European, but the stones may have been reworked Inca. And right across it from on this narrow little street is a very interesting doorway and nicely carved wood doors with those curious breast-like details that I've seen. Just another view down this narrow street. There in the background, the church. And here, a doorway filled in. Now here's a chunk of wall that is original Inca. The small size, relative to the giant ones, was used in important buildings like churches, that kind of thing. And it also is referred to as a polyhedron, and maybe even the cellular. But here this is certainly a piece of wall that is original and has not been tampered too much with it. And notice that it's of the first design, where pieces are fitted together very precisely. Here, I would say, is a good example of that polyhedron cellular design. In other words, precise rocks fitted together very nicely. Obviously, the one in the center is the center of the flower. Here again, that cellular design stands out. But notice, it's contiguously repetitive. The big rock being the center of the flower, but if I shift over a bit, isn't that rock now the center of that flower? Etc., etc. And now we have the same design right here, but I'm guessing that subsidence, maybe due to earthquakes, is causing this wall to come apart, and therefore you see a fair amount of mortar in between these rocks. Okay, we're now at the intersection of Corri Calle and Huayna Panta. We're going to turn left and go up these stairways. Okay, we're now going to go up these stairways, cross Sucia Street, Switzerland. Again, notice this is that first class of architectural style, second division. In other words, the smaller pieces, although there's some darn good sized pieces there. Again, it's the same corner we looked at where there is a little bit of an attack on the integrity, probably from earthquakes. Notice also a couple of details. The drainage hole, very much like we've seen in the still original sites. And here, that very nice interconnecting of the stones. We're going to continue up this stairway and across the street Sucia, which means Sweden. That's the street my hostel's on, so I've walked up it several times. Across that street to the next intersection that's important to us. Up there is my hostel, but we'll continue on up the stairway to the street called Atad, or Ataud, which means the coffin. I'm taking a little side trip, apparently to this place. Okay, this balcony just gives me, and the two lovers on the bench behind me, if they were looking, which they're not, a nice view of the rooftops right there at the center of town. And now the Plaza. Notice the churches off in the background, as well as the two churches on the plaza. Now this wall is reasonably recent, 5, 10, 15 years, something like that. But you can see again, they still continue to be able to use those old Inca stones as a resource. Here, for example, we have a stone that I've seen before where it's been somewhat worked in the sense that there's a little bit of a flat border around it. Now one could argue when they're looking at that rock, is this a way for the artisan to dramatize the inherent beauty of the rock face by putting a frame around it? I don't know if this was their thought, but it seems reasonable. This is just an interesting insight into the magnitude of the use of adobe and the mortar between it. Now this is interesting because I can't tell whether it's new work with a lot of mortar or whether it's old stone covered up and mortar placed in the seams and painted. You never know when you're staying in a hostel in these kind of places whether it's 100 years old or 200 years old. And now we're at the intersection of Wainapata and Ataud, and we'll turn right and go down this street. And notice the road is pretty, using a layer of rock, an ordinary rock to the right, then those smaller pebbles turned on edge, and then flatter rocks. This is somewhat unusual because a lot of these streets just have boulders and they're bumpy. This may be original sedimentary, it's the style, but with all of the mortar in there, I'm guessing it's not original, but it might be. Okay, this looks like the original cellular. Notice right there, there's a stone. I'll focus down on it, and it looks like it's the center of a flower. Let's see if you can pick out a couple. Here are a couple of windows, and again these may be near the classical period in which the Spanish used the Inca stone. Certainly a neoclassic. A dead giveaway, if it weren't already obvious, is the cross in that icon. And notice the beautifully carved snakes facing each other on that very large lintel. And here a curious niche. Seen that design of niche before. It almost looks like a handhold or a foothold. As you look along this wall, you can see that these courses are not level. Whether that was the initial design or whether it's a product of the subsidence due to to earthquakes or not, don't really know. But whatever it is, notice how the rocks remain tight. We're outside the Colegio Real San Francisco de Borja, but a very pretty little typical city kind of park. There aren't any plants, but there are two potential fountain areas, places for people to sit, people to sell their wares, and it's right, obviously, in the center of town, right next to the square. Here's a potentially interesting twist on the cellular. Use one of the Inca square rocks and go around it. Okay, we're at the intersection of Cuesta del Almirante, but we're going to turn left up this street. Notice a very nicely preserved and very much in use sedimentary array, and we want to get a closer look at that snake in the stone there on the right side of that opening. You notice that it's more than a snake. The snake has his head up in the upper lap. It looks like an arc or a circle, part of a circle with a point in the center, and then off to the right is this other, which I don't know what it is. Could be another snake. That might be its head. Note the fine detail of this small, maybe 8-inch long piece of stone. And here, a very thin piece of stone. Haven't seen that very often where they used filler Here is a very pretty and dramatic colonial Spanish church style type thing, obviously with the conquistador with the sword in his hand. Oh, gracias. And a very elaborate entryway, most of which is probably using the same Inca stones, if not an Inca building or foundation, as is this wall. Now, if you look closely at that wall, you'll see that it's numbered LL9, L6, J6, blah, 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 and that's probably archaeologists. Here a very pretty Inca stone with two snakes in it. I cannot tell if these are two snakes passing or if they're two snakes going to the right, diverging. This is an impressive piece of sculpture if it's in stone, which it appears to be. Somewhat redeems the Spanish. I wonder if you live on this street whether you either pick the wrong direction or jumpstart your own experience. Here we exit this Cordoba de Tucumán into the Plaza de Nazarenas. This is the Museo de Arte Precolombino. And this may well have been a reconstructed one, I don't know. This is Siete Culebras. This is called the colonial, well, it is a colonial Inca wall. It's called the Wall of Snakes, and you can see some as I pan by, but I'm going to go get a closer look at these. What is an irony is that the Catholic Church can tear down the animist religion and structures of the Inca, but then reflect their own animist mythology. God, the hypocrisy of that church. What the significance is of the number and the placement of snakes on this wall is interesting. Notice again the breast detail of this door. On the opposite side of the doorway are two snakes, each going in the opposite direction. At the far right of this wall are 5 snakes. There's one that's difficult to make out. And it seems to be going to the right and down. Here are 2 snakes going in opposite directions. 3rd snake, or 4th snake, seems to be climbing. And way over here on the edge, 6 and 7 snakes right against the edge. Now here the sidewall's filled with snakes. One right against the edge on the left. A couple stones over, a horizontal one. And there, if you look just up to the upper right of that horizontal one, you'll see the remains of another vertical one. Over on the next, and just before we get to the gate, look like 2 small snakes right together. And look at this snake, how it comes down and then kind of does a U, which is kind of novel. And still another. Here an intimate little walkway between the Capilla, or chapel, and the church itself. When we look closely at these are the pillow-shaped stones. Why they call this 7 snakes when there are 8 snakes on that wall, I don't know. You get an idea of the thickness of this plaster overlay. Either a newly carved or beautifully restored balcony. Remember, the flowers were a very important symbol to the Inca. Whether this was Spanish architecture with the same icon, or hard to imagine it was because they were showing respect to one of the Inca icons. Some more little pretty balcony window, or balcony just for individual doorways. That's kind of cool. Going uphill to see this large lintel that was used just as a wall filler. Okay, this is an example of one of the best preserved streets of semi-cyclopean polygonal style. Finding this in a city is a kind of a thrill because it's such a massive example of what the Spanish normally tore down. Notice how now you've got the huge megalithic blocks down here, like this one and the one below it. And then up here you've got the much smaller ones that seems natural. Again, those protrusions, whether they're simply decoration, notice there are lots of them on the rocks here, far more than we see in any other place that I've been at. While I was standing looking at this, a man came up to see me, old Mexican man, 69 years of age to be exact. He was an artist and took me into his shop and showed me how he had been selling art here, of course, and in England and Germany since he was 34, and in the United States. And a nice man. He said he was 69, guessed I was 70. I said, no, 68. And I pointed at him, I said, you are old man. We all got a laugh out of that. Interesting that there's some faint graffiti here, and if I read it right, it's 1886. But that could be wrong. Now this looks like an example of the cellular design in the massive Inca Wall. Here's an 11-sided rock, and in a few minutes apparently we'll see a 12-sided rock. And this is a 12-sided rock.
You're from United States?
Okay, allegedly, these rocks portray a puma. The rock with the angle in the upper left hand is the head. You may even notice the nose and the line representing the eye. Two protrusions, the ears, and then as you come back here, the double row all the way back to this part right here. And then that pointy rock is the male puma thingy. Okay, now immediately below is the snake. Notice there's his head pointed to the right. His eye you can see, and the rock in front of it is the tongue, and then the snake comes back here like this, and its tail ends underneath the head, if you will, or to the right of the head of the. Now the one animal that's missing from the trilogy is the condor, and the condor was here. That would be his one of his legs, and this would be his other legs. But the Spanish destroyed the wall from above, so it'd probably be about twice as high as it is now, and then you'd see the rest of the body.
It is better. In the solstice is beautiful. You can see many shapes in each center archaeological from Cusco. Those were on the floor.
After the earthquake.
Yes, yeah. And after, look at. Did you visit Machu Picchu?
Yes.
Machu Picchu?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In Machu Picchu, obsidiana, for example, in order to put.
What kind of stone?
Obsidiana.
Obsidiana.
And Higuaya was in order to polish.
What kind of wood did they use?
Wood? Chonta.
Chonta.
Chonta wood.
From the jungle. Here we notice something different. Notice that the slope here is down at an angle. Probably again part of the design for earthquakes. Notice here those typical holes that were used in the quarry to break a rock apart. What my friend is telling me that they learned at Vilcabamba is that those Incas used a mixture of plants, and that when the plant mixture solution was applied, it somehow made the stone a little softer. Might have been some kind of acid, and so that might have been a strategy that they used to work this kind of stone so perfectly.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 angles, no?
Yeah.
It's obvious that the angles is not so perfect, no? But the angles is the join of two lines, no?
And this is Inca.
Look at, I will explain this. This wall of the double door. In Inca's time was only for important persons, only of the nobility, okay?
See.
But what happened when the Spanish came? They taking the men taking as slaves, and it was ordered to make by Spanish this kind of door. But if you see,
so what this wall is representing is it was made for the Spanish. The Spanish had the Indian slaves build this. Now the Indian slaves knew the technique, and the reason that they
it kind of stones is called
the kind of andesite.
Andesite.
Yeah. Okay. So again, this wall was made by Inca slaves who used these complex rocks, in other words, made them to show the future that the wall was made by Incas, even though it was made for the Spanish. And the Spanish also made the Incas use glue or cement in between the rocks, which the Incas knew they didn't need. That's another indicator.
Before
Lago Morqui. Okay, just some notes. This kind of stone was the what kind do you call it?
Green diorite.
Oh,
it is
a granite. Granite, and it's a volcanic stone. The other stone in that far wall down there was just sedimentary, because this used to be the large lake I mentioned a moment ago, and the other stones out in front were an andesite. This is the street where I met my little guide, and she took me for a little tour. She was very good at and all she wanted was me to give her 10 soles, and in turn she gave me 2 postcards. This is obviously Spanish. Here's a close-up of some very pretty iron-worked balconies. And some very pretty wood ones. These would be magnificent put on the front deck. Okay, I'm going to walk down San Agustin, which is there, but notice the angle. This is the classic angle of I'm looking back up San Agustin Road, but here you can see that angle that the Incas built their walls at as a anti-earthquake strategy. And here, even though this is the second tier of that first style of the Inca and their best, you've noticed that there's larger rocks at the bottom and then progressively gets smaller as you work up. And you can also see by the deep indentions and the bevels on the sides that it was dressed, and here of course leaving a frame. Here you can see the post-Inca people just beat the hell out of the side of that rock until they had it kinda flattened out. Just an exquisite example of the difference in skill and intent. An interesting, probably a Spanish doorway, even though it's using the large Inca lintel. But some interesting doors. I'll focus down a little tighter on them. Notice how far the street has come up. Here we can see a doorway, but then you can see inside of it the construction of arches for this building, and the huge logs that hold it up. Probably a pretty old building. Something Spanish. I wonder what the coat of arms is for. It's called the Casa de los Cuatro Bustos. It may have been the home of an important somebody, and there are busts, if you will, of some of the important people associated with it. Just a close-up of what the Italians would call the terrazzo of this little square's patio, if you will, using different colored stones to create different... This little girl wants me to take a picture of her. As you can see the different designs, see there's 3 triangles there. If you look at this, if you look at the top, there are 3 levels. Condor, Puma, Serpiente. What this is for here, I don't know. But very pretty. Okay, here you go. Oh, look at that. Whoa! Fantastico! Whoa! And this carved rock is supposed to represent the puma's paw print. I've just walked down from the little square where the puma's paw was to a larger place that I'd been at before when I went around the Coricancha, intermixed with subsequent colonial reworking. Now I'm back at this little park across the street from Coricancha, the Convento de Santo Domingo Museo. Just a note, I got to the Limpa. It's interesting that signs like this one often point as though your street's going to continue, but it stops right here. half hour from the Corre Concha. We stopped at this little locals restaurant and ordered some soup, and you get this chicken soup, which I love to eat, and you get a big huge pile of chicken and then potatoes and usually some other kind of vegetables in there. This is a mural at the Palacio de Justica, Palace of Justice, and I'll just pan slowly across it and then maybe pick out some detail. Blind Justice with her scales. The Roman Senate. Why there's 10 Roman numerals, I don't know. That ubiquitous eye, seen on the American dollar bill. This is probably a reference to Greek gods. This looks like a serpent's head. Perhaps Adam and Eve damned to hell. Inca temple. An Inca leader. The importance of water and their ability to control and use it. Here, probable execution of an Inca leader by the conquistadors, and here the church at their best, crucifying or in some way executing Peruvians. Perhaps a modern day small court circumstance, although it's got a crucifix on the table, but a computer in the lower right hand corner. Down here perhaps their Supreme Court. Notice here the three water flows down into what looks to be a description of the agricultural abundance perhaps of Peru. This is a man across from my room, across the street, installing some tiles to waterproof that roof window. Notice also the sign down here and the thin wires going across. They're electrified. Working in his bare feet.